What's going on, guys? Over here, and welcome back to the Pitlane podcast, episode number 43 today, to review the Chinese Grand Prix. Joined by my usual hosts of the Pitlane podcast, myself, Callum, and Tom. And China, a much better showing from the 2017 season. A lot of awesome overtakes out there. Not too many after about lap 36 it was, but before then, a pretty hectic race also with a very changeable start. We had Carlos Sainz, the only guy on slick tyres at the very start. Everyone else on Inters. It was very clear the track wasn't totally wet enough for the Inters, really. It was only wet in some areas of the track. Mixed things up, and then we had a fair few overtakes. A nice top five closeness battle, I would say. Bit of a train with Vettel, Raikkonen, and then the Red Bull cars, and they all swap positions eventually to lap 36 to eventually get a finishing order. I'll just run you through here of Lewis Hamilton, if you didn't know, won the Grand Prix in the end. 6.2 seconds to Sebastian Vettel. Verstappen just about holding on to the podium there at the end with Ricciardo 4th and Raikkonen 5th. Bottas 6th. Carlos Sainz 7th, doing pretty damn good. Magnussen as well in 8th place. Sergio Perez, and then Ocon rounding off the top 10. But guys, general thoughts about that race? I think much better showing than Australia for sure.
Can't say no to a bit of rain, can you? Just to spice it up a little bit, but no, a much bigger step up from the subpar the Melbourne race. It was we had a lot more organic overtakes, and we're probably going to end up going into that maybe a little bit later on into the podcast. But just a lot more excitement, a lot of drivers coming through the field, some incidents here and there, and a race which, again, it's kind of like in Australia, we didn't know who was going to win. And you come out of qualifying and you think Mercedes do have the upper hand, but what can Ferrari do? What can Red Bull do? Will the changeable conditions change it up? And it did. It brought a whole host of opportunities for other drivers, and overall really enjoyable.
I'm going to delve straight into it here, and I think if we had longer DRS zones, that could have been a much better race even still. The amount of times in that back straight where we've seen battles and they've just run out of straight. If we just had the longer DRS zones that were proposed, then I think we could have had an even better race, in my opinion, personally. Especially the Ricciardo battle, for example. Also, when Raikkonen and Vettel were trying to get past Ricciardo early on in the race, there were so many opportunities in the race where they just had a bit of a longer DRS zone on the back straight, could have made it for a much better race, because I watched a Spanish commentary and they made a good point. Most of the overtakes this race weren't DRS related because they're all into turn 6, which is just a corner with no major straight behind it. So it's an interesting one when you think about it, because obviously everyone's talking about extended DRS zones and trying to give more room to overtake, but then every single overtake was at turn 6 today. So
I think it was a case of like because the entry to turn 6 is that really short straight, but because you have to come off the winding first part of that track, it's just because it's basically a traction battle, and like every time I think in most instances the overtakes were really done by the car that had the better traction and then just carried forward that entire thing. And then it was a case of we kind of sussed it out kind of halfway through that lap 36 period where it just appeared to be, if you just had the balls to just dive bomb, basically, if you're able to control the dive bomb, you can make it work. But apart from that, it was actually quite difficult to just do a normal sort of out-braking maneuver, because every time it looked like they had to really dive for it and basically just do a little bit of praying, a little bit of skill on the entry, and it made it work. And we did see, to be fair, that there were some cracking overtakes. Like the Vettel and Ricciardo one, I was in bits, like on the exit, side by side. I need the wallpaper of that. I said it on Twitter. I need a wallpaper of that. That was awesome. Banging tyres a little bit of smoke coming off. That was great. Verstappen also just showed up Ricciardo at the first part of the Grand Prix by just swooping down the inside. I think that was more of a case of maybe Ricciardo wasn't as confident in those conditions, and then later on we did see Ricciardo come back at Verstappen. So they're quite evenly matched, to be fair to Ricciardo, over the course of the race. But at the beginning, Verstappen was in a class of his own. I think, like Brundle said on the podium, like racing AI, like F1 game cars, like at the opening lap, going from 17th to, P7 in like 1.5 laps.
Thing is, I didn't even notice he was that far up the grid, because I was taken away by Alonso's start. So it was like, well. Especially because I was watching Spanish commentary, so all they're doing is talk about him and Sainz. So the focus was on them so much that they realised on like lap 6 all of a sudden, midway through the safety car, the virtual safety car, they were like, "Oh, Verstappen's in 7th," and it was like, "Oh wow, yeah, he actually had an incredible start." So an interesting one. You could really, I think we're starting to see a pattern here. Obviously, with these cars, you're starting to see like it sort of separates the men from the boys, and especially in these sort of mixed conditions, you can see who really stands out. You know, people like Sainz, people like Alonso, Verstappen, and then obviously Lewis and Seb as well. Those guys really sort of stood out today. I thought Magnussen did alright as well compared to his teammates. So, you know, you get a few people who really excel in these mixed conditions, and that's who you tell really has the metal to be a good driver. Obviously, yes, Jenson Button proved he was the master of these conditions. And overall, I enjoyed the race. It was good. Fell a bit flat towards the end, but I think an F1 race normally always has a bit of a dead period. So there you go.
Yeah, I think there always is
yeah,
something
agree.
like that. Like just a zone, if it's at the beginning, middle, or end. This one was at the end, unfortunately, but...
I'll say this, the Chinese Grand Prix, the last two have been pretty good, so hopefully
yeah.
If it has a bit of a Bahrain about it, then...
Well, that's what I was going to say.
It has been solid, yeah.
Like, it was a good point that I think you brought it up in, like, the 2 podcasts ago about, you know, Bahrain will be a big test, I think, for you said personally for you. And I agree that, you know, Bahrain's usually been a very good one to gauge the V6 era of excitement because, you know, obviously 2014 was such a good one compared to the really dull 2013 one back in the old era. So it will be a good test, and I think we've built up to it quite nicely. You know, we just had a really promising Chinese Grand Prix, some really nice overtakes compared to what was a very, very dull Australian one. And it's next week. Don't have to wait that long. So it's going to be very, very awesome to see what these new cars bring up at Bahrain, what that on-track battle is going to be like, and yeah, it's going to be a good one. And I love the fact it's literally next week. Like,
that's so good. Like, I know, I'm actually looking forward to it. It's good because I don't care what anyone says to me. I said it over loosely on Twitter via a few tweets. This has been Mercedes' track. Let's not make a mistake about it. They've dominated this track since 2012. And Vettel finished 6.2 seconds behind, and he was at 1.6. So, I know Hamilton had it controlled, and he could have put his foot down whenever he wanted to. But even still, Ferrari up until Q3 also looked genuinely quick. So, I'm looking forward to it. I think we genuinely have a battle, at least at the moment. Obviously, we know Ferrari tend to make a few mistakes and normally fall away sometimes. So, for now, we've got a battle. I want to wait until the European season comes along. But so far, I'm relishing the fact that we could have a battle between these two. And so far, one apiece. We go to Bahrain next. Who will take it?
All levels.
You can tell, though, that the whole paddock is loving it so far. You can just see between the two drivers of Hamilton and Vettel, you can see that them two are relishing the title fight between them, because technically they've never really had a one-on-one battle ever in their careers, and they've both been in Formula 1 for so long. It's always been it's always been Vettel and Alonso, and it's always been Hamilton and Rosberg. So we've never seen them two go up against each other. And just thinking about it overall in the race, you can just see like Vettel was just buzzing the moment he dropped down to P6 after pitting underneath the virtual safety car, and then the safety car came out and completely screwed him over, coming back through the field. And if anything, I disagree with Tom with the DRS, because if we did, we would have been robbed of really good overtakes, because it allowed drivers to spend 3, 4, 5 laps behind a driver to find a way through. And turn 6 was the best opportunity, definitely. True. But you did notice that it did take a certain amount of laps to maybe like bide the time, see which way, and obviously in them sort of conditions, maybe wait until it's a mistake, and that's where it does separate the men from the boys, because you get this whole philosophy behind they've got to be concentrated for like 56 laps. It's hard enough being dry, but with just little damp patches here and there, damp curbs, wet pieces of astroturf. That's why this race was so fun to watch. And then it does call out the lower drivers. I'm not pointing any fingers, but when you see silly little spins from Bottas, from Palmer, I know Hulkenberg had a little spin as well, and I know that can happen. But if you want to be winning races and if you want to be winning world titles, you can't be having silly little spins like that.
Well, Alonso was taking some fun jabs at Bottas and Mercedes, like on the team radio.
But I think it was sort of an indirect jab at McLaren, and how, because in the tweet, obviously, I don't think he's actually taking the jab at Mercedes. I think he's laughing with Mercedes, because obviously they said we're going to blitz past Alonso because, you know, it's a Mercedes. And he's obviously laughing at McLaren because he literally, like, when he just flew past him when he went past him. So I think you make a good point there, Cal. Because if the DRS zones as they are, I guess it made them think more, work harder towards the overtakes that they did make, i.e. Vettel and Verstappen into turn 6. But I don't know, I just personally think there were so many opportunities that race, especially down the back straight, like that Ricciardo Verstappen battle could have been a lot more tasty if the DRS zone had been extended a bit more. That's just, I know we're looking at it, but
that's the thing. If it was a little bit longer,
one's difficult.
We'd just been passed straight away.
This one's
It's
difficult.
it's a toss of the coin. Do you want loads of overtakes, or do you want a tense battle? If you want a tense battle, then you have short DRS zones, but then it makes for a boring race because obviously people have to time and have a lot more time to figure out
It's
a
a
move.
difficult one.
Whereas if you want DRS, then it's just going bang, 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 bang. So
It's a difficult one because like the overtakes that we saw were great, but it's just the fact that because because of the trains, it meant the gaps were actually slowly getting larger and larger with those trains. Like Ricardo and Raikkonen were slowing Vettel down so much because Vettel immediately banged in a fastest lap, immediately got 3 seconds within Verstappen. So although we saw that great overtake, it was a shame, and even Vettel touched upon it in the podium, that also with the safety car, it meant the gap to him and Lewis was a lot larger than it could have actually been in theory, because they were very, very close match.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just picturing what could have actually been if there wasn't maybe that extra safety car, and if Vettel got past a lot earlier. We could have even seen a much closer fight between those two specifically. So
we can go in detail about it with the team order, but I did want to talk about that because a lot of people were saying Ferrari bottled their strategy, and I was like, not really. Like, yeah, they did for other areas, which I'll mention in a minute, but the safety car was just so unfortunate. Like, the fact is, Mercedes knew they were screwed because Ferrari made that call was perfectly timed, and they would have been out ahead. The safety car was like a get me out of jail free card. They literally were licking their chops, especially the fact they had to drive through the pit lane as well.
Yeah,
they couldn't have had a better time for a safety car.
Was,
it saved them, so it got them out of jail big time.
Yeah, because like the great thing was Vettel was basically just going to be able to push after the virtual safety car ended on those slicks while Lewis was out on Inters. But then literally, so like I think Vettel said it on the podium as well. Literally, as he was about to start pushing, safety car came out. So just so unlucky that he's basically then stuck there, obviously, because then you can't overtake and everyone's going at that slower pace. So yeah, they really did get kind of, I would say, hit with a big hammer in terms of what their strategy was going to look like.
Yeah, I think I don't talk about it too much, so I think we'll just say we'll go in team order for now. But there were other areas where Ferrari bottled the strategy, in my opinion, in this race where they could have, got a much better result. But kicking off with Mercedes, Hamilton, perfect job, controlled it. Like I said, he and the team got out of jail with the safety car at the start. That sort of basically limited or basically reduced any risk of them being under threat for the race win today. And he did a great job. Obviously, pulled out an incredible lap in Q3 yesterday. The lap was absolutely
very
exceptional.
Nice lap.
And the car through turns 7 and 8, flat out, I mean, whoa.
Even then, like,
decent.
through into 9, like, the way he just was able to veer the car right to left and jink it in the brake zone was just so nice to watch.
I spoke to Tom about this yesterday.
Yeah, we spoke about it,
I was just in awe at qualifying. Qualifying was just absolutely amazing. So weirdly enough, on board, it didn't, like, it looked impressive, obviously, but it was 7 and 8. It looked just off board. I couldn't get over the change of direction of that car. I looked absolutely on it. Qualifying is like some sort of gladiator race. It's ridiculous how quick they go in, but just the fact that like Hamilton, he was behind in Q1, Q2, just biding his time. And this is the thing, it's not just in the race, it's in qualifying, because last year it was a lot of, can Ferrari do it? And now it's, will Ferrari do it? There's a much greater chance, and I won't be surprised if we see Vettel on pole sometime soon. I know Mercedes are very strong with qualifying, but I think if Vettel can maybe just regain that little magic that he had earlier on in his career, I think we might see Vettel on the podium. But in contrast to the other side of the...
a better opportunity for him. No, I was going to say the next race should give a better opportunity. Like I said, this race, to be fair, he was closer to this race than he was Australia. And this is more of a Mercedes track than Australia for me, based off of past years. So maybe the next race might be an opportunity for him. I infamously remember last year where Hamilton... I remember Ferrari looking very close to Mercedes in qualifying, and then they literally cranked it up in Q3, and they went like 6/10 faster, I think it was. It was like so depressing. Everyone was like, okay, Ferrari looked actually close. And then Q3 came and they cranked up the engine ridiculously, and they went so much faster. But I think this year, they got a bit more of a match in terms of, I think even the engine department, Ferrari look really slow.
They're only, I think, comparing the top speeds down the straights during Q3, I think Vettel was only, I would say, 5 or 6 kph down. So very decent Ferrari to close that gap there. I think they had some teething problems with Kimi during the race today, with him saying that he wasn't getting drive off the final banking corner onto the straight. And he had to basically go into an extra KERS mode or ERS mode to deploy energy. Otherwise, in the normal race mode, it sounded like it wasn't deploying properly. So little teething issues for him there. And in general, Raikkonen, I don't know what you make of that of his race. He started complaining quite early on about the tyres. He started complaining about the tyres quite early on, and then I think it was just a poor case of Ferrari maybe going too much on the computer, saying that Kimi could have still made the podium if he just stayed out. But there was no way within the feeling of the car that he could make it, so they pitted him. So it's a very unfortunate race.
It was a weird weekend for him because
very weird one.
All he does is just understeer all weekend. He was understeering in qualifying.
China's quite a front limited circuit, so I think if those issues are kind of like it makes sense. But Vettel wasn't having similar issues, so I don't know if I think Ted brought this up. Ted Kravitz brought this up on his notebook that it maybe seems like Kimi benefits more from a Friday practice than Vettel does, because Kimi maybe takes longer to fine tune that front end to where he wants it to be. Perhaps.
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
Odd, yeah.
I think I want to reserve judgment until we go team for team order. So now we talk about Hamilton, Bottas. This is where the topic begins. At the moment, the number 2 drivers are very, very clear in their teams, and I've got to say I'm surprised at the difference between the 2 Mercedes drivers and both Ferrari drivers. However, me and Cal spoke yesterday. These regulations are allowing the drivers to push to the limit, which is good because they get to enjoy themselves and we get to see how much skill they really possess. And you're seeing the difference in gap between teammates this season, especially between the Mercedes and the Ferrari drivers. So it just goes to show when they're allowed to really give it all they got, you're seeing who the better driver is by a mile.
See who the world champions are, really.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's so again with like the little mistakes and everything, it's just not ideal for Mercedes. I've always been like kind of questioning because Mercedes still feel a little hurt that Rosberg left them unexpectedly, and they've always been saying that they've never been able to fully recover from it, and they're not gonna recover if Bottas. I don't know whether Mercedes will work better with 2 number 1 drivers, or just with Lewis Hamilton being solely the number 1 driver now, because it is obviously Hamilton's the number 1 driver in Mercedes, Vettel is the number 1 driver in Ferrari, and it seems to be working because you've got 2 drivers now going for the title. But in terms of Bottas and being on this 1-year contract, he hasn't really got enough time to really prove his worth.
Looks fishy.
At the same time, Hamilton, I only saw this literally now after the race, that Hamilton was quoted saying that he doesn't think Alonso would come to Mercedes because he feels the balance is good at Mercedes, and he feels that at the moment there's just no chance of that happening because Mercedes internally are like Bottas at their team, and that they were impressed by him in Australia, that he had the pace there. Obviously, this race was different. Also, I think he did make the mistake, which kind of hampered his race entirely. So he did have pace. Good pace midway through that race, just the fact that he was so far back already that he couldn't come back all the way through the field.
It was a shame for him.
Yeah, it's a shame, but yeah, Hamilton, really poured some water on that in terms of Valtteri leaving the team. So it's gonna be certainly interesting. At the moment, there's 2 different stories, really. Like you said, like on track, it looks like he may not have enough time to really prove it, but then internally, it seems like they're all very fine with it, as long as, I guess, they'll be fine with it until Bottas doesn't do well enough to keep them ahead in the constructors. Because for now, they're ahead because Bottas got up into that 6th place, and it just meant that Mercedes had that net points gain on Ferrari to edge back into the lead of the championship. So once that is not good enough for them, then that's when he's on thin ice.
Yeah, I think I agree. Alonso might not go to Mercedes. I sort of put a tweet out there yesterday. I think he's going somewhere else. If he does go somewhere else, I think it's a better option for him where he's at in his career. A French team. But that's for another podcast. I think Mercedes had a solid race. I think Bottas sort of saved himself, but even still, like if you compare to like Vettel's pace, for example, Vettel was at 6th at one time and he still finished second, whereas Bottas really didn't seem to make any major inroads. And it just goes to show, really. I think Bottas. I watched his interview yesterday after qualifying, and I've watched also his the paddock interviews.
Yeah,
he looks a little bit shaky. Like his voice is like trembling. He's sort of stumbling over his words a little bit. He just seems a bit. I wouldn't say on edge because it's really early. But
in qualifying, he was overdriving that car.
Yeah,
you could tell. You could just tell he was outbraking himself and everywhere.
Spanish commentary I mentioned him today, like he looks a bit edgy on the steering wheel. I wouldn't say someone's putting him to the sword already, but I think he's got a much bigger challenge than he anticipated.
Yeah.
Well, someone tweeted me, I think you guys as well, when Bottas will get his first win, or if he will get his first win. And I was quite optimistic in saying maybe around Baku, Canada, part of the season. But you look at it now, and basically,
I'm going to be honest. I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen.
Actually,
because any time that Hamilton slips up, it will be Vettel.
Even from
any time that Vettel slipped up,
even from Australia, I like. If you asked me after Australia that same question, I wouldn't have thought so because I just don't see it happen. I just don't see how it would happen unless Hamilton and Vettel had horrible races.
Well, because before, like, it's a similar situation to Rosberg Hamilton. I'd love to know how Rosberg would have fared against Hamilton in these sort of cars where you really push the limit and test driver skill. Because obviously the previous cars allowed drivers who aren't particularly that fast and overall speed, but were very intelligent like Rosberg to still get a good result. I think Rosberg would be in a very similar situation to Bottas right now. But having said that, I just feel like before the Mercedes, if Hamilton didn't win, then you know the number 2 driver is going to win because pretty much most races there was 1-2 procession order. But now it's just not because he's getting easily smacked by Vettel and today by both Red Bulls. So it's looking tight for him. But I think Mercedes aside, they regained their constructors lead, which is good for them. But moving on to the second.
Well, I guess you just mentioned Ferrari and then Red Bull. I mean, Ferrari we've talked about quite extensively already. I don't know. Is there anything more to add to their race?
Well, here's my qualm with the race today. That's one. The other one for me is I was screaming at them. They should have let Vettel go when he was behind Raikkonen, who was behind Ricciardo. They should have let him go. That was too many laps behind Raikkonen.
Yeah, it was like
and
5.
He wasn't making a move. I know he passed him eventually, and it was good to see him pass him and whatnot. But the fact is, if you let him go like 5 laps earlier, we could have had a bit of a race up front today. I think Vettel did seem to have the pace, and I think
weirdly
it would have been 5 laps less in dirt, 5 laps less in dirty air, and less tyre damage as well. So
I agree with you. I think
that was the main one for me because we could have had a battle up front for me. So
I agree with you because I think if he let go 5 laps earlier, I think because the gap was only 3 then immediately as Vettel started pushing to Verstappen. 5 laps earlier, I think Vettel would have been right behind Verstappen trying to make a move on him as well.
And his pace was ludicrous once he got past them both. So he could have just
it was insane.
Gone. I was screaming at my screen to just. Raikkonen wasn't even like attempting to make a pass. He was like sitting on the 1 second fence. It was like nothing was going to happen there. I'm surprised it just took him that long. I understand they want to give him like fair rights and let them race and whatnot, which they did, fair enough. But it was a missed opportunity.
In that instance, it was like we're hampering both your races really in this instance.
And then Raikkonen ended out at sea anyway, so it was all for nothing. Speaking of Raikkonen, like Cal said, no, he didn't say anything on the radio.
I was going to say because I think maybe Vettel. If Vettel made a fuss, then I think he might have got his way because you can't argue against Vettel's pace, and it just kind of out loud now. That do you know, like last year, do you know when like Vettel, do you know how Ferrari was just off the pace, so Raikkonen's slightly off pace was kind of just pushed to the side. Now Ferrari are properly at the pinnacle. It really does outline
everyone's under pressure
you need to be on your game. You need to be on. And this is why, even if we're sounding harsh against Bottas, they're Mercedes, world champions. You can't just be. You can't have an off day. It's not a thing in Formula One. You need to be on it all the time, and that's why you've got successful drivers like Hamilton and Vettel that are always at the front. And I think I'm not being funny, but if Raikkonen doesn't pick it up, you're going to have to get elbowed out of that seat.
The funny thing with Raikkonen is he always says the same thing. He always starts off bad and ends strong. His second half tends to be stronger than his first. But I think the other strategy mistake was with Raikkonen. I think, especially considering if you look where Raikkonen was on the last lap when the 2 Red Bulls were battling, if they'd simply pit him for super soft 5 laps earlier, he could have been right in that mix, and he could have probably
well.
diced it up. So Ferrari missed out on a double podium today, and possibly even a scrap for the race win if they'd just been a bit more quicker on the strategy front and had a bit of I won't say balls to ruin the race or ruin the action, but if they just let Vettel pass, then I think there could have been a bit of a better race. But that was like my two qualms because the strategy, the idea of strategy of pitting Vettel early just before during the virtual safety car, that was brilliant. I thought that was the race winning strategy already on lap 4, but then obviously Giovinazzi, a Ferrari reserve driver, had to go and ruin it for Ferrari. So
Yeah, that was a major thing. Like, aside from like the Raikkonen strategy call, that was also a big blow. Like, that was a bigger blow. I feel like, in terms of the battling for the race win, like the 6.2 gap. Yeah, it could have been closed up by that pass, but it could have definitely been 6.2 the other way if Vettel had not got held up there by the safety car. So unfortunate there. Yeah, you mentioned Red Bull. Yeah. So moving down to them, the third best team, and surprisingly, actually up there. From Australia, they look nowhere. Even in qualifying, Ricciardo's miles off the pace in qualifying. But again, in Inter's conditions, tricky, slippery conditions.
Towards the end, 30 plus seconds behind.
Yeah, no, as in the pace wasn't there, but they did a really good job, in my opinion, to actually still stay there in third and fourth, albeit with some issues from Raikkonen. But they'll be very, very happy with that. And as we already mentioned, Max's brilliant start. But even later on in the race, then the pace he had to then try and actually chase after Hamilton, then, and was just basically keeping him honest. And then just generally to actually keep it in third and fourth, I think they're going to be very, very happy. A bit of sigh of relief, maybe, perhaps, in a way, because before the race, Red Bull really looked like a really solid third, nowhere near second or first.
Yeah, they were miles off in qualifying, weren't they? It was almost shocking. Like, they would look like there was almost being overtaken by Williams. I know they stepped it up a little bit in Q3, and Massa basically just did the best that he could, but he just couldn't get the Red Bulls. But oddly, it was kind of the ideal conditions, and I think Red Bull are going to kind of hope for more of them because they've got Verstappen, so he's going to exceed. But obviously, you can't. Ricciardo's no slouch either.
They need the European season to arrive. They need Spain to arrive.
They do,
also, just a caveat, I just saw a picture. We completely forgot. What do you make of Vettel's position thing at the start?
I didn't find any quality.
No issue, really.
Like, he was.
Although, if everyone was out of position, it would add some questions.
That's what they said.
It would add some questions, but down the when you're talking about the actual lengthwise, he was still in the perfect position. He was just sideways, so he didn't actually gain any advantage.
Yeah, it's just slightly closer to
a little bit odd, though.
It looked weird. It looked freaking odd, but
it's like
lining up on the grid.
Got it wrong because the thing is, it's not like he's got a car in front to obstruct his view. He had a clear picture of the grid, but obviously missed it. That was weird. But I think Red Bull had a really good race today. I've got to say, I enjoyed the little dice at the end. Like I said, I just wish they could have had a few more backs and forth.
See, that's the thing for me.
DRS.
Well, there was a lot of talk. Like, it was a really nice race, but I think there's been some overhyping a little bit just about that, like the concept of tension and like waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like a few people I've seen on Twitter got hyped up too much about cars sitting behind each other and trying to build up. Oh no, it's just tension. It's tension, but. Personally, for me, I didn't feel too much tension between Ricciardo and Verstappen. Like, yes, Verstappen was feeling the pressure on the last lap. You saw it locked up a little bit, went wide. That was, like, actual close. But on the build-up, like, people, like, 5 laps to the end, people were talking about, the tension, Ricciardo's catching. It's like, it's not that tentative. Like, it's pure pace at this point. It's just pure Delta time pace.
I felt tension a little bit. I did.
On the last lap?
No. Because I knew Ricciardo was going to catch him because he was going fast enough to catch him, and it mathematically made sense. An example where I didn't feel tension is when we had the 3-car train with Vettel, Raikkonen, and Ricciardo, and Raikkonen was doing nothing. That's when I didn't feel tension because I know we weren't going to do anything to him. There's a difference there. I did think Ricciardo's going to catch it because the thing is, we saw Verstappen struggle on 2 softs in the first stint, and obviously that horrible flat spot he picked up, and
that affected him quite a lot.
He almost did it again on the penultimate lap. So I thought it was room for a battle. I wish we got a little bit more, but. Yeah, I think the tyres were feeling a bit second hand. I think Red Bull favouring the super soft probably hurt them towards the last round of their stints.
Yeah, I was surprised at that. I was surprised that there was that big 1 tyre difference between them and Ferrari and Mercedes definitely preferring the soft tyres. So a little bit of change in the different car mechanics on how they like their tires and how they sit on their tires. I guess you could say sit on their sit on their
Well, it was a good strategy
It works.
because I think it was curious because everyone, like Ferrari and Mercedes, both got their calls wrong, expecting to go to the end on a soft tire, and they were nowhere near going to the end. But it was good though because this is what I was talking about in the last podcast. I don't want to ramble too long because obviously we're talking about the race and we can talk about other things in the loose podcast. But we're talking about the tyre differences and the tyre compound selection. These tyres were exactly what I like. They were consistently good enough for a solid about 20-25 laps, and then you started to really lose a bit of pace. Like the soft tyre had its sort of working
Your
window,
wish came true.
and then
it
it just
actually
dropped
did
off.
coming true.
And
yeah.
like the super soft as well, like you saw Verstappen, he had about a 15-lap window, and then it just faded. That's what I like, because you get to use every sort of compound and get what you expect from it, but then at the same time, when it goes, it goes. So that was, for me, the compounds worked quite nice today. I think, I'm surprised no one used the medium. I thought that could have been an option, especially for the whole going to the end. No one touched the medium. I don't think anyone wanted a medium tyre at all in the race, so that was an interesting one.
No.
But yeah, a good race for Red Bull. I think they needed the podium, but they still got a lot.
They still got
long way
homework
to
do. Still got homework to do. And then moving back down and kind of going through the kind of last of the top 10. Carlos Sainz, obviously Alonso would have been there in the scrap, but after his retirement, Sainz, that is a brilliant job. Best of the rest, because outside those top 3 cars, the rest of the pack is so far behind. So for Sainz to be the best of the rest is very, very good. Even
Ballsy
after...
stuff.
Yeah, because after his spin at the start and just getting it wrong, like right in the first lap with the slicks, so he was actually down the order. Then he had to come back through a little bit, and then just to keep whole station. Because I thought earlier on in the race, in the kind of first stint after it was fully dry, that the 2 Force Indias were caught up to him just with the Mercedes engine pace. But he was keeping it through. You know, he was with Alonso there, and it's a
That car's very good. That's a very good car.
decent job in 7th.
Yeah, the Toro Rosso is
Unfortunate.
absolutely on it. Yeah.
Unfortunate for Kvyat, because I don't actually know what actually happened to him, because we just saw a replay of him stranded. So I'm guessing it was a car failure, but it's just a shame because he was actually looking stronger than Sainz this weekend.
He was inside
He had a solid, he qualified Sainz.
Yeah, he was looking strong.
Yeah,
Sainz
top
said
10.
he didn't have the settings quite right of his Toro Rosso quite yet, so you know he was
So
looking a
far,
lot stronger.
Kvyat does look better this year compared to last year. It seems the winter's helped him get his head together. He's much closer to Sainz.
Yeah, it's good.
I thought,
It's good.
literally, I think Sainz could have been a major threat today. I think if the race start was anywhere else on the track except for the pit straight, he could have probably been in the lead or near there in the first corner. Like, literally, it was like the main straight and the straight from the hairpin in the final corner before that were wet. It was just those 2 parts, and the race happened to start there. If you start the race like midway through the second sector, it could have been a totally different story. But obviously, just that first section completely hurt Sainz. So.
One question that I just want to ask Yuku, because I thought this when it happened. You know the safety car? Did you notice that the pack wasn't very closed up?
That's what I said. I deleted the tweet, but I was
gonna tweet out about it, but I saw then no one else question it, so I thought, okay, maybe I'm wrong. But for sure, the safety car did not do its correct procedure.
It wasn't.
I
think maybe the rest of the field wasn't going fast enough.
It was like there was a virtual safety car, and then the real one was just there for show.
Because the gaps were still there. It was weird, like really strange.
The safety car pulled in, and there was no backing up a position. It was the weirdest restart ever, but no one questioned it at the time on Twitter, so I didn't say anything about it. But it was so weird.
Lewis didn't back the pack up, but if you think about it, why should he? Because if there's loads of gaps behind, that's less chance of anyone being close to him. So I thought it was really odd that.
No, but that's normally what this like the safety okay, albeit he doesn't have to back the pack up. Like he can go straight as soon as it goes green, he can go. But that's not the rest of the pack closing up. It's not actually the leader's job. It's the safety car's job, and everyone else's job. I don't know if like all the drivers had like a incorrect message on their dashboard for like keeping the delta time and instead of not closing up or something. But it just seemed weird. Maybe the fact they had to go through the pit lane maybe affected things, because that did elongate times, and that's how Vettel lost more time with that. Like it was a very weird thing to see, like some cars.
That's only a pit straight though. I don't think that would have stopped. It's very odd.
It
very
elongated
odd
some times because it allowed Ricciardo to do a pit stop and still come out where he was. So it was a bit of an odd situation. So yeah, that was a little bit strange. So we talked about Sainz in 7th place. Just a little wrap up. Magnussen in 8th place. Really good for him to bounce back after a really poor Australian Grand Prix, and did basically him and Grosjean had the flip of what their weekends were. Although Grosjean still did come in 11th place, Haas's favourite position. But Kevin Magnussen's come back at 8th. Really, really happy that he got there, come back. And then Force India, just another solid drive, really. 9th and 10th. Ocon getting in his second race points again in a row. He'll be happy with that. Decent.
To be fair, thinking about Grosjean and Magnussen, some decent battling from them too as well. Both of them are very good on the racecraft. They're very confident behind the wheel. They can whiz the car all over the track, and
Grosjean,
they can
I think two dive bombs, like within like 4 laps of each other down the inside of turn 6. Very nice, very nice.
And also just thinking about Alonso, because I want to spare a thought for Alonso because he was doing so well, such an incredible start, and like aside from the Honda and McLaren issues. You do see that Alonso is still burning with talent underneath him. He has got that just raw talent.
It's like he said on the radio. Like they got on the radio and said, "Science ahead of you is the fastest on track," and he was like, "I'm fastest in the corners, though." Okay, the only reason I'm not the fastest on track right now is because it's down the straight.
Yeah, and also just thinking about it with because the reason I wanted to bring it up was Alonso's cheeky little re-dive. Back up the inside, I think it was a Toro Rosso on Sainz.
Yeah, it was
when he overtook him. Brilliant. And then, because I literally said it out loud, I was like, "Go on, lad," because he just like, I know he didn't pull off because it was wet. Literally. He literally just went duck back out again. I really like that. Yeah, I really loved it.
I said before the podcast to make a controversial statement. This is where it's going to go. I know we're earlier into the season, we're only 2 races in, but last season Alonso said he's the best. Like this is the best he's ever driven, and I completely agree. Where is Stoffel Van Dorn?
Yeah, he's been shown up at the moment.
We're talking about
then again, he hasn't had the rest.
To be fair, I think it's highly, it's you can't really compare it.
It's a bit harsh, yeah.
It's a rookie coming into the sport, being up against Fernando Alonso. Like, I don't think there is you can do a trial by fire, albeit, but I personally think it's very harsh to critically compare at this stage of his career to Fernando Alonso. I also think Van Dorn's got very unlucky in every single weekend so far because there's not been a smooth weekend for his car. And it's annoying for me to watch that. There seems to be very uneven, like, obviously, maybe because it's Alonso, they're trying a little bit harder. But every week, like, both weekends, there's been some issue to his car in qualifying and in the race.
Alonso, he's been the one that has DNF'd in both races, not Van Dorn.
Van Dorn DNF today.
Yeah, but he didn't DNF in Australia. But Alonso
he still scored no points. So.
In Australia, he had to do the power cycle, though, as well. That kind of reset his car, and then he kind of just trundled around to finish.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
I'm
really,
just saying,
reality,
so far, in no session have I seen him... I'm not doubting. I'm sure he'll probably come good, but so far, the gap has been much bigger. But much bigger than what I thought.
It is very large. It's very apparent in Q1 that Alonso can pull it out of the bag. But I just think that it's very, very too early to judge. It's not like Bottas v Hamilton. This is a guy this is his third F1 race and his second one in this new McLaren that is technically probably looking worse relative to the rest of the grid than the first one he drove in Bahrain of last year. So I think there's still time. And also he's had a lot of teething issues with that car in pretty much every session, like power cycling in the race, issues with I think ERS, I think it was in quali at some point, and then practice. Just Australia had like an oil issue or something like that. It just it's been very unfortunate for him. And then I think rounding up, Renault. Hulkenberg, such a good performance in Q3. Just such a shame his race kind of just went down the tanker, really. And just maybe that's the true Renault pace, potentially. But he did an absolute bonkers job in qualifying, though. Like, fair play to him. I think Tom pointed out on Twitter yesterday. To compare it to where Renault was.
Hello?
Yeah.
Q3, like, you never would have seen that last year. And look where Palmer is. That's another teammate. That's another guy who's been smacked by his teammate. Like... Wow, like, Hulkenberg did a great job. And this is where my theory lies. If Renault are like this and they pull these out of the bag and they consistently get better, we know what Alonso can do with a bad car. There's a seat going next year, I think, if Palmer keeps performing like this. So, that's my theory.
Tom getting the crystal ball out.
Because I think Mercedes, something about it doesn't add up to me. Doesn't seem like a...
Tom's a philosopher here.
Yeah, I'm pulling out my Eddie Jordan card after 2 races this season, but I've got a feeling that's where, especially if Renault progressed nicely during the season, Alonso might go, this is where I started, so this is where I'll end. Not bad.
Maybe. To be fair, I won't put it past him, and then Sauber. Giovinazzi.
Show these rookiness this weekend.
Yeah, you can't crash twice in a weekend. I know, slightly damp and everything, but again, it's Formula One. You can't crash that often. Otherwise, you get the elbow out the door.
Yeah, it was. But the thing is, though,
unlucky.
I think it's going to be a rather unfortunate case for him that everyone's now going to judge him. Everyone's now going to judge him on the single two crashes, especially most of the F1 fans who probably don't watch GP2 and haven't seen him in GP2 where he's shown his skill. So I think it's going to be a little bit unfortunate, but at the same time, yeah, it's he didn't do himself much justice crashing twice in the weekend. I think it was Brundle saying expensive weekend for him and the team. And I think now, if there were any doubts about like a bit of a conspiracy of not wanting Verline in the car, I think that'll kind of push it away as long as Verline's fit. I don't think he's going to turn up to Bahrain. It's too soon.
I was going to ask.
It's too soon.
And
I do think it is. I think it is a fitness problem, and I think you can't drive these cars when you're unfit. It's like football. You wouldn't be expected to be picked for the lineup if you're not fit enough for it.
I think there's something more to it. I said it in the last podcast. Something's going on, but yeah, I agree. It's too soon to put him in the next race.
And then for Ericsson, just Sauber. So I think that really kind of rounds up the.
Actually, before you end it, I think it was Kate Hewitt that put it on Twitter, and it was quite interesting actually with injuries because you look at football, and even the slightest niggle, any sort of excuse will be drawn up for a reason for a player not to be played. Like it would be like, oh yeah, he's only 90% fit, or he's only 95% fit. He's almost there with fitness. There is a philosophy around Formula One that they're gladiators and they should drive because they like Formula One and driving cars. But you think about it, why is that?
Yeah, there shouldn't be a double standard there. There shouldn't be a double standard between sports. Like I know, and I think
driver shouldn't be forced
I know that's
into
an
a
issue
car.
because sports fans of different genres will complain about what happens in other sports. But I don't think there should be any two differences between that. I think if you're not fully fit, you're not fully fit, and you shouldn't really risk it. Because if concentration goes, mid-race, you start to feel, your neck going, your arms going. It's not going to end pretty sometimes. You just never know. And I don't think you can take that chance, really.
Yeah,
so,
but overall with the race, solid
overall,
7 out of 10.
Yeah, okay, 7 out of 10.
Yeah,
I would say.
I think across the board.
Yeah, I would say 7. I would say 7. Some really, really nice overtakes. Again, I really do need a wallpaper of that side-by-side moment. And promising stuff. Looking forward to Bahrain. I hope that this is a setup for what could be a very, very nice race in Bahrain. And I hope that Vettel isn't hampered by safety cars so that we can actually see a literal on-track battle.
Hopefully, this year, Vettel actually starts the race in Bahrain. Fingers crossed.
Yes, that as well. Yeah. That as well. We hope. So we'll see you guys next week. It won't be a kind of mid-race, mid-week one. It will be straight away for the review of the Bahrain Grand Prix then. So we'll see you guys then. If you did enjoy this podcast, smash that like button. Let us know what we thought in the comments below. If you're out there, do subscribe. What?
I want to cut you off there.
What?
Predictions for the next race. We've got to try and do this. This is like a new thing.
Are we gonna? Oh, because we didn't really do this last year. We didn't do predictions.
We're just sticking one on the fly. I'm gonna say.
Okay, on the fly. Quickly on the fly. Go on.
I'm gonna say. Vettel pole, Vettel win.
Oh,
Vettel pole, Hamilton win.
I'm going to say a Hamilton pole, Vettel win.
Oh, we love our Hamiltons and Vettels.
There we go. So, again, if you did enjoy it, hit that like button. If you're new around here, do subscribe to this channel for the podcast. Check out these two in the description. Also, our Twitter handles are above our names. If you want to follow us during the race, we generally tweet out mid-race as well, unless Callum and Tom are dead from a night out the previous night. Wink, wink. But we'll see you guys next time if you did enjoy it. We hope you did enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.